Welcome back to College Football Addiction. TJ here talking about the UGA Texas game, a massive one in the SEC and really all of college football on Saturday night. At the end of the day, when you come at the King, you cannot miss. And unfortunately, Texas missed pretty badly here. I'm not doing a film breakdown on this. If you want to go to Brooks Austin's channel, he does a great job of that. If you want to go follow the On3 Texas guys, we had them on before, Graham Coffey, Jake Crane, they'll break this down. But just want to share some thoughts. If you're wondering who I am, why this Florida State guy, listen, I ranted about that game too. I'll link it at the end, but let's talk about this game. If I'd have told you beforehand that Carson Beck would have 3 interceptions, and that Georgia's yardage total, did they even hit 300 yards? I don't have that pulled right up in front of me right now. You probably have thought, like, this game is not going to go UGA's way. However, as bad as Texas was, or as bad as UGA was, as sloppy as they were at times, their defense, heroes of the game, continuing to give UGA short field after short field after short field. I mean, you know this, right? You're a Texas diehard, you're a UGA diehard if you're watching this, or maybe you just love college football in general. This was the game of the week. You watched the game, you understand this, but a 13-yard touchdown drive, then a 13-yard field goal drive, a 34-yard touchdown drive, and then a 25-yard field goal drive. 20 points, and they never had to go 50 yards. 26 and 25 is 51 and 34. What's that make that? 85 yards total. They had one drive later in the game that was longer than all of those 4 combined. That was the touchdown that ended up putting the game away. Well, Texas also benefited from a 9-yard short drive. Obviously, the water bottle situation, the cutting that to 1 score was big. It felt like that might be where things start to turn around. But unfortunately for Texas, it wasn't enough. And I know there's probably a lot of thoughts on the water bottle stuff. Here's my quick take on it. It's not that deep. Number 1, don't blow calls that bad. Get together with your crew and talk about it before you make a final call on that. Number 2, am I going to advocate for people throwing stuff onto the field? Not necessarily. Am I going to say that refs should change a call based on a crowd reaction or maybe peeking up at the replay while the people are throwing water bottles on the field? Not necessarily. But I'm not one of these people that says you can't change the call in that situation. You can't and Georgia fans, I'm here calling you guys the King, right? Probably the best team in college football despite the loss to Alabama. I know Oregon fans, maybe if they're watching this, don't like that. But I'm not one of these people that says you can't change the call in that situation. Not at all. I don't care if you change the call 4 years later. Get it right. And that's my stance at the end of the day. Listen, I'm a Florida State guy. I didn't like how the refs gave Miami the touchdown, or took the touchdown away from Virginia Tech a few weeks ago on that Friday night that I was in Tuscaloosa before UGA played Alabama. I didn't like how the refs took that touchdown away because they didn't follow the letter of the law. But at the end of the day, they got the call right. And how can you ever complain about the refs getting the call right? How can you ever complain about that? At the end of the day, UGA did what they needed to do, though. They responded to that immediately. Texas gets the 9-yard touchdown drive. The water bottle stuff is hilarious. One more Florida State shot. I saw somebody say if putting trash on the field means that penalties won't go against you, then Florida State should have 0 penalties on the year because they've been trash all season. As a Florida State fan, I can take some of the jokes. That's fine with me. When it got cut to 1 score, and Sark goes for the extra point, bad 2-point math there, but that's fine, goes for the extra point, cuts it to 8, 1-score game, an 89-yard touchdown drive by Georgia seals it. 30-15, your final score. An 89-yard drive that was longer than the other 4 scoring drives combined. Now, in this game, absolutely massive from Georgia's defense to make Arch Manning, make Quinn Ewers, make the entire offense very pedestrian. If not for the water bottle overturn, which again, I do think was the right thing to do, if not for that, I don't. What did they scored 1 touchdown. UGA has a huge game set up now with Tennessee in a few weeks. November 16th, I believe it is. I think they have UF and Ole Miss before that, bye week coming up to get healthy after this Texas game. to get rested, to get a little sharper. Hopefully Beck plays a little bit better down the stretch. You got the rivalry game. UF scored about 50 tonight. I don't necessarily know that they're for real, but they certainly look better. The rivalry game, and then Ole Miss right after that. If you can get to that Tennessee game still undefeated, 2 more conference wins. Tennessee game, obviously win that. You're in the SEC championship, unless there's some kind of weird tiebreaker. I'll look all that over later. And then for Texas, still your work's cut out for you too. Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky should be 3 wins there. And then A&M at the end of the year on the road. Texas could certainly work themselves back into a rematch. We'll see if LSU can keep winning. But Bama getting their second one today certainly is a big issue for them trying to get there. And then if Georgia can beat Tennessee, could get a rematch. Texas, UGA in the Dome. Certainly not over for Texas. Certainly not, necessarily worried about them long term. Got exposed a little bit. Played their first really good team. The question was, who have they played? Michigan, overrated. Mississippi State, not that good. They Oklahoma, an absolute dumpster fire. South Carolina, my goodness, blew them up today. So, the question was, who had they played? And the answer was nobody. But at the end of the day, they had won their games. They'd won them convincingly. They've done what you needed to do, and you can only play the teams that are on your schedule. But then you got to play the big dogs. And what we told people, what I said to Graham, I said this to Jerry, I said this to Blake, Kirby as an underdog. I mean, go back and watch him, right? You have to go back and watch game previews, but I said this to all 3 of them. Kirby as an underdog is scary. Again, the way that he was to convince his team back in a few years ago that they were underdogs, nobody believed in them, everybody doubted them. That's psycho stuff, right? In the best way possible, right? Like, I'm not ragging on Kirby. The way that he was able to convince his teams of that, you're not that good, nobody believes in you, when everybody's looking at him like, there's a billion first-rounders over here. I knew that Kirby in the underdog role was a problem. Didn't necessarily know that it was going to look like this. Didn't know it was going to be this kind of domination. The defense, oh my goodness. The issues that they had in the first half, and again, it's a much better matchup. Not having a mobile quarterback, not having a Milroe that can kind of take off on you at any time. But it's a much better matchup for them to play a pocket kid. Much, much better matchup. And they absolutely took advantage. The defensive line was ferocious. We asked all 3 guys that we had on last week about the trench battle. And obviously, Georgia dominated that. I still think Texas is really good. They got a lot of talent. They're not quite there. They're not quite there at that level yet. Now, they're going to get their chance. And they got some games, like we said, to tune some things up. You got UF. That's at home. You got Arkansas. That should be a win. You got Kentucky. That should be a win. A&M, I still think that should be a win. If you clean some things up, maybe you get a rematch, see what happens in the playoffs. They're still going to be a really good team against anybody else they play in the playoffs outside of the Oklahoma, the Oregons, the Georgias, the Ohio States. Those could give them problems. I think Texas can probably beat anybody else around, and they could beat any of those teams on any given day. Texas didn't play their best. Georgia didn't play their best. Defensively, they certainly did. Georgia's running game certainly did what they needed to do. They weren't elite by any means, but they did what they needed to do against Texas. They didn't have to do a lot. They just kept getting the ball in plus territory over and over and over and over again. Texas, just a clinic in giving the game away. 4 drives under 50 yards that resulted in scores, 13, 13, 34, 25. That's the story of the game to me. Short fields, Georgia converted when they had to. You bowed up a couple of times, 13-yard field goal drive, 25-yard field goal drive, but you bowed up at times. Texas' defense couldn't do enough. Not with those short fields. The offense put them in horrible positions, and Georgia took advantage. Again, you come at the king, you can't miss. And unfortunately tonight for Texas, you missed. A lot of season left. You got a 12-team playoff. You'd have to really fumble the bag here to not make it. I think they're going to be double-digit favorites in every game except for A&M. Maybe a double-digit favorite in that one, depending on how the next several weeks go. Get to the end of the year, we'll see how that one goes. But, certainly a game that Texas would love to have back. I don't know that they get dominated like this if they play it again. But, UGA came out. And I think UGA wins if they play again. I don't know if it looks quite like this or not. I think, but Beck plays a little bit better. The score probably is even worse. So what are your thoughts on this? Hey, why is the Florida State guy talking about this? Why isn't he focused on his own team? College football addiction. We're going to talk about all the big games. If you want to watch the Florida State rant, hit the subscribe button on the way out and then click the video on the screen to check that out here on College Football Addiction.